Hey, what's up? It's Devonte, the CEO, and today we are going to be going over how to find your purpose. We're going to talk about a few things: God, stewardship, and entrepreneurship, how all of them work together for the glory of God, right? So we're actually just going to hop right into it because I think it's very, very important to make sure that if you have a business and you have these skills, opportunities, and everything like that God has blessed you with, that you use them to be in alignment with His purpose and His will, right? So we're actually going to be reading a passage really quick from Matthew 25, starting at verse 14. That's the parable about a master and his three servants, right? And starting at 14, it says, "And again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, the master returned from his trip and called them to give account of how they used his money. The servant whom he entrusted with 5 bags of silver came forward 5 more and said, 'Master, you've given me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I earned 5 more.' The master was full of praise and said, 'Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together.' In 22, he says, the servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, 'Master, you have gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 2 more.' The master said, 'Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together.' In 24, then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, 'Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, so I hid it in the earth. Look, here's your money back.' But the master replied, 'You wicked and lazy servant. If you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money into the bank? At least I could have gotten some interest on it.'" Right? And this is a powerful passage because there are 4 things that I want to go over what I received from this passage. And I actually heard one of my church members go over this, and it's 4 points that we have to talk about and how we relate this to business, right? And the first one is ownership, right? We have to make sure that we understand that God owns everything. Just like in the parable, the master owned the silver, but he divided it amongst his servants, and they were supposed to manage it just the way that we manage the gifts and talents that God has given us here on this earth, right? And here's the thing. We have to make sure that we practice proper stewardship, because proper stewardship is a direct reflection of our obedience to what God has called for us to do. Now, you may be asking, what is stewardship? According to the Bible, stewardship is utilizing and managing all resources God provides for the glory of God and for the betterment of His creation. So God has given us all these different skills and talents that we can use for our business, and it is our duty to make sure that we use our gifts as tools to connect others to Christ, right? And we have to make sure that we're using them to make sure that we're using them for His glory and for the betterment of the people around us, right? Now, the second thing that we have to talk about is going to be responsibility, right? Although God gives us things to enjoy like finances or wealth and relationship, nothing ultimately belongs to us, right? God owns everything, like I already said. And we're responsible for how we treat what He has given us and what we do with the things that He's given us. For example, in the parable, He gave the silver in proportion of what each servant could handle, right? Your talents and your skills and your resources that He's given you, you have to make sure that you manage those well and in accordance with what God wants you to do with that, right? Our job as children of God is to make sure that we manage the holdings and in according to His will, right? He can bless us with all these skills, resources, and talents. But if we're not utilizing them in according to His will, then they become useless. And we have to make sure that the skills He's blessed us with are not useless and are not in vain. Right? Now, the third thing that we have to talk about, and is actually very important, is accountability, right? In the story, Master and the 3 servants, at the end when the master returned, all 3 servants had to give an account for what they did with what was given to them while the master was gone. In the same way, we are going to have to give an account to God when when we're presented before the glory of God, and we have to answer to how we managed what He's given us. Right? We're all stewards of the resources and abilities and opportunities that God has entrusted us with. And the thing that I want you to ask yourself is, when you are finally leaving this earth and we are presented before the glory of God, and God says to us, how have you used the resources, skills, and talents that I have blessed you with to glorify my name and to better the people around you, right? It is our job and responsibility to make sure that we're doing that here on the earth, because at the end of the day, when all of this perishes and all of this fades away, and we have to answer to God, we have to give an account for what He has blessed us with, how we have used it for His glory and for the betterment of the people around us, right? So, for example, if you're a fitness coach, how are you using that skill set that you've learned, that God has blessed you with as a resource? How are you using that to glorify God and to benefit the people around you, right? If you're just a personal trainer and you aren't using it to glorify God, right, then it's out of alignment with His purpose. Now, how do you find your purpose is the ultimate question. The way that you find your purpose is you are able to take the skills and the resources and talents that God has given you, and you use them to glorify God and to better the people around you. Once you can take those things and you can meet in the middle, that is how you get in alignment with what your purpose is on this earth. Because if you utilize the resources and tools and skills that were given to you, but you're not using them to glorify God and to better the people around you, then you're out of alignment with what God has in store for you, or what God meant for you, right? You're out of alignment with His will. So if you can find a balance with the talents that He's given you, and you can use them to glorify God, and you can meet them in the middle, that is how you align yourself with God and your purpose. Now, God has given us free will and authority over all creations. However, we're not allowed to just rule over everything the way we see fit. We have to make sure that we practice out of authority under the eye of the Creator, right? How does He want me to lead in my business? How does He want me to use my business to benefit others and to glorify His name? Because God is a God of structure, right? There's a specific way that God wants us to utilize what He's given us, because He wants to be worshiped in a certain way, right? So we have to make sure that we are operating under the authority of the eye of the Creator, right? Executing daily in accordance with the principles that He's already established. And here's the thing, all of this is for a good purpose. And the ultimate thing is the reward. What is the reward out of all of this, right? And the reward, just like in the parable where the master said in verse 21, he said, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together," right? And at the end of the day, when we are presented before God and we give an account, we want to hear the words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling the small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities." That's the ultimate reward. Even if He doesn't give us more responsibilities, right? Even if He doesn't give us more, the ultimate reward is in the very first sentence where He says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." That's the ultimate reward. And once you are in alignment with God and you are in alignment with your purpose and what His will is for your life, for utilizing your skills and resources and talents, once you're in alignment, it becomes drastically clear. And when it's drastically clear and you operate in what God has called for you to do, the reward is automatically going to come. And the ultimate reward, again, is hearing, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." And as Christians, we have to remember that everything that we do here on this earth is a direct reflection and connection to what God is doing here on this earth. So we have to operate with a sound mind and with clarity under the guidance of God and in accordance with His will, in alignment with what your purpose is on this earth. But that's all that I have for this video. And just to recap, if you are struggling to find your purpose and you know that God has blessed you with skills, responsibility, resources, and talents, right? If you know that God has blessed you with those things, and you know that it is our job to utilize these things to glorify God and to better the people around us, once you can find a middle ground of those two, you have found your purpose. But that's all that I have, actually. And here's the thing. If you're tired of doing it on your own and you want a community of faith-based entrepreneurs like myself, and if you're tired of playing the guessing game of how to find your purpose, right? If you are tired of doing it on your own and struggling and having to guess what the next step is, all I want you to do is click the link below and hop on a call with me, right? I want to see where you are, where you want to go, and what's stopping you from getting there, and see how we can use what God has called for you, or how we can use the talents that God has given you and use those to glorify his name and to better the people around you, right? Here's the worst case. The worst case scenario is we separate ways and we leave you with tons of free resources. Just hop on a call, especially if you're an action taker. We only want action takers, Christian or faith-based action takers who are ready to take their business to the next level, especially for the glory of God. But that's all that I have for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.